going to talk about multi-sided, but we're going to end up turning a five-sided tea light today. So that's... Yeah, my first question was, how many people enjoyed their ninth grade math class? We're going to do a little bit of math tonight as well. Neil, if you give me the next slide, please. My whole interest in turning multi-sided polygons started with the AAW magazine that came out in December. And I know of two people that got interested in it. John Beasley ended up turning some small boxes out of that are actually called out in the magazine itself. And my interest wasn't in the boxes. I wanted to just learn the geometry of multi-sided turning. I've done a lot of tea lights and candle holders in the past, but I'd never done anything with multi-sided. So that my goal was to do that. John, is it okay if I pass this around? Neil, next slide, please. Yeah, I just grabbed the biggest one. In the magazine, the gentleman that wrote the article talked about how to measure and lay out a multi-sided polygon, and he used a protractor, thank you, to lay it out on paper, and then he transferred it from paper onto his wood. And I thought that was kind of a klutzy way of doing it, so wanted to explore some other ways of doing it. John Beasley came up with a method of his own, and if Neil, you put the next slide up. John used what's called polar coordinate graph paper, and he laid out the 5 and the 7 and came up with little jigs that you end up putting on the wood and mark your angles and then draw the lines, and it worked really well for small items where you want to duplicate the same thing over and over and over again. So it was a really good idea to start this way. I'm going to pass these around as well. Next slide. So tonight we're going to talk about, one, how I came up with laying them out. We're going to talk about how to cut them, how to mount them on the lathe, how to turn them, how to sand them, and how to finish them. And so layout is really the key. And I've worked on laying out everything from 3 to 8-sided devices. And I decided that the 3 doesn't work very well. Neil, I don't know if you can get this picture or not. Can we do it overhead? Let's try that one. That one? Does that show up? So this is a layout for a 3-sided, and you see what happens is that you end up cutting away so much wood and you leave so little behind that I've kind of discarded the idea of turning any 3-sided polygons. It just doesn't make any sense. So we just kind of throw that one out. So if you go to the next slide, please, Neil. So the layout will be cutting a square block of wood, inscribing a circle inside it, measuring the diameter of that circle. That's the key issue here is measuring accurately the diameter of the circle. Then calculating what the chord will be. The chord is this length on your side, and then cutting it out and getting ready to turn it. So if you go to the next slide.
What did you find an ideal size for the square?
I cut them. Oh, what did I find an ideal size for the square? I like 4 to 5 inches. Most of these were cut out of 4.5 inch squares. And I bought lumber from Wood World, and I bought it in 4.5 inch. And most of the stuff I've got is ash because it turns really well, and it's easy to turn. And I like having wood that is at least 6 quarters to 8 quarters. I turned some that were on 4/4, and you can see you don't get much space inside at all. So when you get a light to put in there, it kind of looks rather odd. So 6 and 8/4 wood works the best. Most of this tonight we'll be using 8/4. So here's the key to this whole thing. A little bit of 9th grade mathematics is the length of this chord. And the length of that chord is the diameter of your inscribed circle times the sine of 180 degrees divided by n. N is the number of sides on your polygon. So if you're doing a 5-sided polygon, it would be 180 divided by 5. If you're doing a 7, it would be 180 divided by 7. And then if you got a calculator that will find the sine of that angle, then you multiply that times the diameter, and you'll get the length of your chord. Now we're going to try and make it a little easier than that. So if you go to the next slide. Well, here's the layouts. As you can see them, here's the 5-sided. And I've measured the diameter. And in this particular one, when I laid it out on a piece of paper to take the picture, it was 6.5 inches in diameter. This doesn't say diameter, it says 2r, which is the radius twice, which is the same as the diameter. So we ended up with 6.5 inches in the diameter, and 180 divided by 5 is 36 degrees, which is the angle that you needed. And the sine of 36 is 0.588. So you multiply that times the diameter, and you get 3.682 inches. And that's the length of each of these chords. It gives you the chord length. And so, Neil, if you just bring up the next one, it's really the same thing, only this was done for a 7-sided. And you can see it was the same 6.5 inch diameter. 180 degrees divided by 7 is 25.714 degrees. And you take the sine of that and you get 0.434. And you multiply that times the diameter and you get 2.82. So again, that's the chord length on a 7-sided polygon. So now to make this a little bit simpler, Neil, if you'd go to the next one, please. The 2 key numbers to remember is you don't have to remember the mathematics of d times the sine of 180 over the n. For a 5-sided polygon, remember 0.588. And for a 7-sided polygon, remember 0.434. That's all you need to remember. And we'll have these charts will go on the internet on our website, so you can look them up. You don't need to copy them all down. And So with those two numbers, you can do a 5 or a 7-sided polygon. Next slide. Well, how about a 4, 6, and 8-sided polygon? Well, a 4 is real easy. You just cut it square and you don't worry about it. A 6-sided polygon is the radius of your circle is the same length as your chord. So if you remember when you were a kid and you wanted to draw a star with a compass, you'd draw a circle and then you'd find a point and you'd start inscribing that circle with your compass. You wouldn't change the dimension of the compass at all, and that will give you the 8-sided or the 6-sided polygon. 8-sided is a little bit different in that you can start with a square piece of wood, and if you take a measurement from the center of the wood to the far corner, in this case, now let's find one with the center mark. In this case, where we have a center point, if you measure from that center to the outside corner, and then you put your compass on the outside corner and you scribe an arc, you rotate it, put your compass on the corner and you scribe an arc, you put your compass on the corner and you scribe an arc, and you do that 4 times, you'll end up with marks at these points. All you do is end up cutting the corners off at those marks and you get an 8-sided polygon. Now if you wanted to do and use the inscribed method, you could draw the circle and you could do the mathematics of 180 divided by n and find the sine of that and multiply it times the diameter and lay it out that way as well. But it's much easier just to start with a square piece of wood and cut the corners off and you get an 8-sided polygon. Next one. So let's give this a try real quick. Neil, I don't know, can you get this up on the screen? You gonna try? Okay, so the green line here represents your square piece of wood. And the red line is the diameter, and the black line is an inscribed circle inside that diameter. And so if we measure that red line, and we do it very, very precisely, you'll find that it's 40.5 centimeters. Now I like doing it in centimeters rather than inches, because if I do it in inches, it's going to say 15 and 16 and 15 16 inches. So now to convert that, I got to convert the 15 16ths to a decimal anyway. So why not do it in metric where we've got it in decimal points? So it ends up being 40.5 centimeters. If we do the math on that, we just take the diameter times 0.588 times 40.5 centimeters, we get 23.81 centimeters. So if we take a divider and we set this at 23.8, and I'll do it as close as I can. We'll lock that in place. And you come back and you put this on the bottom on a point at anywhere in the circle and draw an inscribed circle, and you can see there's the length of your chord. So you do that in a couple other spots. And we'll do it over here. And now where those intersect the black line, all we need to do is draw a line between those points. And we have our five-sided polygon with quite accurate sides to it. Now, why do we need a polygon with accurate sides? If you don't, when you start turning it, you'll find that one side will be more lopsided or wider than the other side. So it's important that, first of all, you find the center and you get that marked quite accurately, and secondly, that you measure those chords fairly accurate so that once you get them turned, these points end up being the same dimension. Now, if you look closely at some of these, and I think I can pass this one around, you can see this side is a little bit smaller than that side. Not by much, but a little bit. And it's not really too noticeable, but it is there. And that's because I either didn't get it centered when I started turning it, or I didn't get the chords measured absolutely perfectly. And a little later on in the demo, we'll talk about how you can correct some of that when you do make that error. But let me pass that around. You can see. So that's it. Any questions about the mathematics or the layout of how to get to where you need to be? I mean, it's really simple. You got to remember two numbers, 588 and 434 for the 5 and the 7. And then if you want to get imaginative and go into 9, 10, or 11, it's the same formula that people use for when they make segmented bowls or segmented boxes. And they're talking about some pretty good size diameters, and they're talking about lots of pieces going around. But the length of those pieces fits into that formula the same way. So if you've got, say you wanted a bowl with 18 segments going around it, it would be 180 divided by 18 will give you and take the sine of that number times the diameter, and it'll tell you how wide those segments have to be. So you can use it for segmented turning. Dick, you've done a lot of segmented turning. Or you can use it for making any sort of polygonal device. So tonight, we're going to start. I started with a square blank and all of these. I found the center. I laid it out. Did I send that one around? Yeah, sent that one around with the layout on it. So then I ended up cutting it. Now to mount this on the lathe, there are a whole bunch of different ways you can do it. I'm going to do it tonight on a screw chuck. And if you have a regular screw chuck that goes into your 4-jaw chuck, that works really well. If you don't want to use a screw chuck, there's nothing wrong with putting you can register tonight and buy some raffle tickets. For those of you that want to know where you can get one of these screw chucks, David's holding one up, and that's our quarterly raffle. And for those of us that have gotten these, we've fallen in love with them. They're really great screw chucks.
And JT Turnings has them too. And Lee Valley has them too.
Yeah, and you don't have to buy the Glazer one. It's a little more expensive. You can go to Craft Supply and get one that's a little cheaper. JT Turnings makes one as well, but his is expensive as well. Every chuck comes with a screw, yeah. I just happen to like these because the screw that comes with the chuck is a 3/8 screw. It takes a bigger hole, and this takes a 1/4 inch hole, so it's pretty easy to mount with a 1/4 inch hole. So tonight I'm going to mount it that way, but if you wanted to, you could just put it between centers with a spur drive and a drive on the back, and turn a tenon. This one was done that way, where I just used as a jam and turn a tenon. The key here is to get a tenon on one side. Then we're going to chuck it and turn it, hollow it, or in this case, clean it out. So tonight we're just going to use a screw chuck. This was one I did with a screw chuck and just put a tenon on one side. Then we're going to end up drilling it, and then we're going to hollow it out on the inside so that a glass fitting will fit inside. And I get these glasses from, well, I used to get them from IKEA, and they had they sold these, and they were relatively inexpensive. They came in a tube with a dozen of them. They've stopped selling these, so you can't get them from IKEA anymore. So the last group I got, I found online at Amazon, and they're a little bit bigger in diameter on the top, but the bottom is the same. So that's what we're going to end up working with tonight.
Do you need that, or can you just use the silver tea light?
The question was, do I need that, or can I just use the silver tea light? And yes, you could just use the silver tea light. You put it down in there, but now you've got flame against wood, and I don't want to take the responsibility for somebody burning their house down because I sold them a tea light without glass insert in it. So I prefer that you use a glass insert, if for no other reason than safety, for safety concerns. So let's get started turning. That's where the fun part is. And so as I said, we're going to start with a piece of ash. And I've already drilled this with a 1/4-inch drill, and I'm just going to put it on the screw. And my goal here is just to put a tenon on the back side of it. So I'm going to find the center. And I use this as a gauge. This is the distance that my chuck works. So I put this on here and make a circle. I have this is an old Craftsman Sears Roebuck parting tool that I have cut at a slight angle so that when I go to make a tenon, I'm going to use an inside or a tenon that I expand into. This has the angle on it that my chuck has, so that when I make the tenon, I've got the dovetail for my chuck automatically. And I don't make very deep tenons. This one's probably about 1/8 of an inch. And if you cut it accurately and you cut it with a dovetail, it won't come off. You don't have to worry about it coming off. I use a chuck that has dovetail jaws on it so that I don't need a real big tenon. And I try to make that tenon so that the jaws are almost fully closed so that you get the entire jaw, holding that in, and so that's it, and that runs nice and true. Now we're going to drill this just to get it started. And I don't know if you've seen these drills or not. This is it's made in France by a company, and it's called a Master Cut. And it has a little offset on the shank, both in the Morris taper and in the drill, so that it holds it in place. You don't need a chuck for turning or for drilling with it. That has a Morris, no, the Forster bit is not. It has a little flat on it so that you take a wrench and you tighten it. And I'll show you when I take it off here. So we're just going to drill this, and we're going to get down about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch past the top of the what size am I using? I'm using the biggest one I have, and I think this is 1 5/8 inches. So it's just big enough to get me started. And I'll pass these around. You can see how they work. They're really slick. So now we've got a start of a hole. I'll pass this around. This is what the inside of it looks like right now. And I'm going to now work on hollowing or cleaning that out so that one of these tea lights will fit down inside. And as you can see now, it's not close to fitting. And down on the bottom, there's a pretty good sized hole that was left by the Forstner bit, and I want to clean that out. I want the bottom to be as nice as it can be. So I'm going to use a box scraper, and I have a couple of them here. One of them is one that I made out of a regular scraper, and the larger one is a scraper that I bought from Doug Thompson at SWAT last year. It's just a regular straight square end scraper, and I tapered the side of it a little bit and rounded the end so that it's easy to get down inside. So both of these work really well. They have a burr on both the side and the end, and I'll pass that one around. You can feel the burr on it. And I'm going to go in and just start cutting that. And I'm going to start cleaning the bottom out. And I stop periodically to, okay, I can start getting it in. If there's any questions while I'm doing them, yell out at me. Getting closer. I still need a little bit larger opening on the front. One of the things to remember is as you're cutting this, if you take an 1/8 inch off, you're really taking a 1/4 inch off. So you got to make really light cuts, because you take an inch on this side, it automatically takes 1/8 of an inch on the other side. This is tapered a little bit, yeah. Let me pass that one around. That's one of the original IKEA ones that you got there. And I'm almost there. I like these things to fit, not so they're real sloppy, but so that they're loose enough that you can get them out. I've had them, so I pushed it in, and you can't get it back out again. So you got to be a little bit careful. And so I'm not going straight in. I'm going in at an angle to take care of the taper that's on the side of these. And I like the way that fits both the front and inside, but I want it a little bit deeper. I want this glass to fit down inside just a little bit. So I'm going to take a little more out of the bottom. I want the glass recessed about 1/8 of an inch. And I'm just about there. It's a little tight on the bottom, so I'm going to open the bottom up just a little bit. And I want a nice smooth surface on the bottom, if you can get it. And so I'm happy with that. I think that fits really nice. It's down, probably not 1/8 of an inch, it's down about 1/16 of an inch. And it fits in there snug enough, but loose enough so I can get it out. No, it will not. And the nice part about doing this with ash is that I don't do any sanding on the inside. It's a hard enough wood so that I get a really nice cut. I made some out of maple. And this is just soft maple. And unfortunately, maple tears out quite a bit. So I get a lot of tear out on the inside. And since I don't want to sand, you know, I want to choose some wood that's a little harder where I don't get that tear out. So when I get to this point, I want to start making the shape of it now. And I'm just going to take a standard bowl gouge. And start cleaning the end off. Now, you can hear it. I'm cutting air as well. I'm, you know, wood, air. So you got to make sure you got fairly good speed. I don't know, 2100, something like that. I go by sound, I don't go by speed. I want to make sure it's fast. Let's see, where was I? About there, yeah, 2200 RPM. So I want to look at it, look at the shape, make sure the points are coming out fairly uniform, and I'm fairly pleased with the shape. If I do the same shape on the other side, I'll have a side corner point that's probably about a 1/2 inch, and that gives you a nice shape. One of the tools I use a lot in bowl turning is a shear scraper. And I made this shear scraper out of an old skew, and I sometimes give John Horn a lot of trouble because he's the skew guy, and I say, this is the perfect use of a skew. It doesn't catch, and it gives you a nice finish. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this on its side, up at about 45 degrees, and I'm just going to take that all the way down and make sure I get a really nice smooth surface on it. I'm sorry? I absolutely sand it. And now is the time to sand this side while it's still chucked up and you've got it on the tenon. So what I do is, and I'll start with 180 or 220 depending on how this surface looks. And I power sand in most cases, and I'll do it at about 700 or 800 RPM. And I will make sure that I'm not pointing the sander down this way because I got these points that are sticking out here, and they'll grab that sandpaper in a hurry. So I want to make sure I sand with it, and I'm not going to do a lot of sanding tonight because it creates a lot of dust. But I'll power sand like that, and I'll do it through 400 to 600 grit. And so I will consider this side done. I would probably put a little sanding sealer inside now just to seal the grain up while it's still on the chuck. Because once I take this off, I'll be cutting that tenon off. So then I can't do anything else on this side. So anything you want now, you got to do now before you take it off the chuck. So if you want to put some decoration on it, now's the time to do that. And I'm kind of a groove guy. I like grooves and beads. So we'll put some on here just for fun. And you can round those if you want to. You can make beads out of them, or you can just leave them like that. Adding a little decoration, I think, helps the way they look, and I think they're more attractive when you try and sell them. So I like putting some decoration on them. So now we're going to take it off the chuck, so to speak. We're going to take it off the way it's on there right now. And one of the things you got to remember is this inside is now tapered.